Guys, guys, holy shit. I think this might just be the best episode of INHUMAN so far. So this is the 5th episode of INHUMAN so far, titled Something Inhuman This Way Comes. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but holy shit, I had fun watching this episode. Not constantly, still had its issues that I'm gonna digest into in a little bit, but I think this show highlighted something that was really great for the episode, but I think it also kind of works against the show, and I think it's the show's biggest weakness, the one that I think they could have easily fixed, but they chose not to. And that is focusing at least on one character per episode, because that could have definitely strengthened each character to care about him. Even if each episode felt like a little vignette or like a little mini movie, it at least would have given the characters the proper attention to really fully flesh them out and see where they're coming from, instead of just seeming monotone or like assholes or something like that, which has happened to our fair share of protagonistic humans so far, for a good chunk of them. But what I think I took away, and what we all took away from those of us who are still watching the show, what we all took away from this episode was that Karnak is a beast. It was his story. It was his episode. He took up the majority of he took up approximately 62% of the episode. I mean, it really was 62%. I wouldn't be surprised if that was like some kind of meta joke. And he honed it. I didn't think that it was possible. But he actually honed that story that he was going with the girl. Which, by the way, is it just me or did I miss a scene? I feel like I might have ended the episode a little too early last week, but I do not remember that scene with Liam Neeson and Nathan Drake, discount Walmart version dude, killing off the other dude just randomly, and then all of a sudden going off on a killing binge. That felt forced. I will admit that felt like an escalate. Like that shit escalated quickly. Ron Burgundy will look at that and be like, I don't even fuck with that shit. I'm not even going to comment on it. I'm just going to go ahead and run away. It felt a little too much for this guy. I'm like, really? Out of nowhere, you're going to start putting people down with your revolver that causes sparks to fly out when it hits something? But this is supposed to cause a little bit of tension, but I was genuinely surprised by a couple of things. One, they offed that dude immediately. I was surprised by how quickly he was taken out by the superior weed dealers, because apparently there's always going to be competition in the market, so I guess that's probably the most realistic thing to come out of INHUMAN so far. But then it led to the rather compelling story of Karnak trying to kind of let loose. I'm very saddened that he didn't get to smoke some of that ganja before it went up in flames, but I like that it was another character to tell him, like, hey, not everything has to be calculated. And in a way, it also kind of hit home a little bit for me, because I'm sorry if you guys are getting tired of hearing me talk about her, but me and my girlfriend, it really reminded me an awful lot of me and her when it came to Karnak and the girl that he was with, because I'm the more calculated one, the one that's always looking at the good percentage of things, and then the bad percentage of things going wrong, and the percentage of things going right, and all that stuff. And she's the one that's much more spontaneous. She's the one that likes to do things in the spirit of the moment. And I saw a little bit of us in there, so I guess I could be considered a little bit biased as to why I like the story. But if I was to take myself out and my girlfriend out of the equation, I still think that this was probably one of the best handled subplots so far, because it made me think that Karnak is so far my favorite character out of the entire INHUMANS. And I feel like I would have had that same kind of respect for the other INHUMANS if they each had the amount of screen time that Karnak did in this episode, and each episode kind of dedicated themselves to each and every one of these characters. And I appreciated that Gorgon also got a little slice of the pie here, because he did have some scenes that reminded me an awful lot of the journey that Karnak was going through, where it was kind of inverted. He was the spontaneous one. He was the one that would just jump into the action, and even though he only had like literally like 2 scenes of screen time in this episode, he still had his moments where he was like, okay, you know, maybe I should take things a little bit calculated. And there was a little level of charisma to the way that Karnak approached things, from his storyline as well as the humor, and Gorgon with his humor, and overall an awful lot of humor going all over the place, where I was laughing most out of this episode than the previous episodes, but for the right reasons. Like the moments that were meant to be funny actually made me kind of laugh. The one that got me to laugh the most was, of course, Mortius. Mortius is his name. The dude with the helmet, who I still think needs to get more screen time up until this point. Realizing that what's-his-face, which again felt like a scene that was cut out. I don't know how this happened, but dude got trapped. The other human that can burn with his hands. He escapes out of, you know, grass ties but then again, they didn't know. And then they would put grass ties on him again, only thicker ones, but he could just burn through that. That doesn't make sense. Again, I'll get to the issues in a little bit. But he breaks out, starts running, and then Mortis is just like, really? Because, you know, not to shame anyone here, but how far was that guy gonna get exactly? I'm sorry, but come on. And I think there was a little self-referential humor there where Mortis was just like, really? You're really gonna try to run now? Might not have been the intention, but that's how I interpret it, and it got me to laugh the most. And I think I know why. I knew that I saw a very familiar name in the credits. Kevin, I'm sorry, I know that I'm gonna butcher his last name, Tankaroan, Taturin. I don't know. All I know is that he is one of the core members and driving forces behind, of course, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's directed a handful of episodes, actually a shit ton of episodes, most of which have been some of the series' best episodes. And I feel a little bit of his influence in this episode, where there were so many levels where if he was able to extrapolate some kind of charisma or humor or likability, he was able to get to it. Didn't encompass everybody necessarily, but when it came to some of the characters that this episode focused on, like Karnan, Gorgon, and even Black Bolt had his moments where he's not even talking, he's kind of in the background, and he makes a face that was getting a chuckle out of me, and made me like him. I'm liking him more than his fucking queen, she's gonna have a long road ahead of her, because I was the one really pulling for her, and now you got so many other characters telling her the exact same thing. Do you really have to behave like this to everybody? And I'm hoping she has her moment of realization soon. The reason, however, why early in the review I said that focusing on Karnak so much also kind of brought forward the biggest problem with Inhumans is that we have so many characters, so many Inhumans, so many members of this royal family, that keeping track of all of them makes you almost forget that they were kind of in here in the first place, and they don't get that proper dedication. Once again, Crystal, the weakest of them all, and I called it. A couple episodes ago, I think it was the review for the very first episode, I fucking called it. It was episode 2. I called that her story was gonna divulge into that CW shit. And I'm not talking, you know, the Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow CW. I'm talking very sappy teen romance CW, like Lifetime movies CW, or I guess I should just say Lifetime type of romance, with the dude who I expected to break out into song, I can show you the world, at any fucking moment. He was cringeworthy. Like his little laugh song, he's making the stand-ups, he's running into the water, I'm like, fuck off, dude. Killer chick, she's not really dead. I saw that coming. She's now holding the doctor hostage. I don't know what can really go with that, and I cannot really know that much of what's gonna happen out of this whole Maximus plot, which is doing the exact same thing. He's getting angry at inanimate objects, he's barking orders. They're not really doing much with them, except for the little interesting detail there at the end of having that one dude be kind of like recruited by these other guys who are actually like, no, we're not gonna take any of Maximus' shit. So I'm liking that there's some people in Adelan that are not gonna take his shit. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's logical. That's logical. But there you have it. That's all I can really think of when it comes to some of the negatives of the episode, which are sufficient enough to keep me from being like, oh yes, this is the turning point of Inhumans. It's going to be one of the best shows there for Marvel, right up there with Daredevil and Jessica Jones and S.H.I.E.L.D. No. It still has an awful lot to make up for the first half of this entire miniseries, but I think that there's a little bit of a light in the tunnel after noticing just how much fun I was actually having with this episode. Here's to hoping that Inhumans can really keep this momentum going. And for that, I'm going to be giving episode 5 a very, very low, cautious, and very skeptical, but optimistic, if that makes any sense, 7 out of 10. I actually like this episode, and what I like the most about it is that Karnan is a G, would be a G, at video games. Do you see how he distracted the dude? That was straight up lifted from a video game. I couldn't believe it. So if you watched this week's episode of Inhumans, please let me know in the comments below. Do you think this was the best episode of the series like I did? Or do you think that it just stayed the same? It didn't really set that much apart from the previous episodes? Do you think it still has a long way to go? Or do you see some kind of optimistic light in the tunnel, like I said? Hoping that this will maybe kind of move things forward, especially with all of our characters finally reunited minus Crystal. I honestly think that they could just take off the island now, leave her behind, everything's fine, everything's going to stay the same way that it is. You don't need to worry about her. Also, make sure to like and share the video. Don't forget to subscribe to support the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. And I can't get it out of my iPod either. It's on my iPod. I'm not kidding. My girlfriend caught me listening to it one time. She considered breaking up with me.